Yeah, I want to start with a little anecdote. I recently prepared a presentation for an evening event for some central bankers for the same topic. And I, of course, asked, like Steve did this morning, ChatGPT, and asked it, so what would central bankers expect on this topic by giving a speech at an evening event? Well, not surprisingly, all the typical things came up, but what was surprising to me, one of the last points was also to get a good meal. And I really like that one. So, but let's go a little bit deeper into the green digital finance. So the whole financial sector, I think, is currently challenged, and you all know that, by twin transformation, which is not only digitalization, which we see for quite a while now. The whole fintech revolution is around for almost 20 years now, right? With all the first peer-to-peer platforms that started off. And then, of course, all the sustainability topics came around. So it is kind of a twin transformation. And with that, we last year launched this new center, which is called the Global Center for Sustainable Digital Finance. And as you can see from the logos on the right-hand side, it's a joint initiative. And we thought that sustainability is not possible without tech, because you need a lot of data. And as we just heard from you, it requires really sophisticated solutions. So that's why we thought that bringing the two of them together might make sense. And we've also heard in the presentation earlier this morning about your platform for the interspecies money that basically does the same thing. So let me guide you through a little bit, not doing too much definitions and not too much data this afternoon. We started off with sustainable finance. We all know that, right? It pretty much is suggesting that financial institutions consider the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as being part of their decisions in investments, in payments, and basically everything that they do. But we are talking about green finance now. So green finance is just a subset of it, specifically for focusing on the environmental SDGs. Those are like 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we will come to that one later. So it's all about climate, about water, about land, all these things. So if you put it together and say, hey, what is green digital finance? It's basically using technology, harnessing technology to really foster and promoting sustainability in the financial sector with a specific focus on the environmental SDGs. So that's basically it. Sounds very simple, but it's of course not. So if you look, and that's what it makes a little bit different to the presentation we just saw before, we saw that the incumbent financial institutions, being central banks or insurance companies, they were basically and are still lagging behind in many of these fields. Entrepreneurship and innovation is basically coming from the startups, as did the fintech startups also did a couple of years ago. You can now see some sustainable fintechs. And they're really promoting sustainability in a broad range of fields. So let me give you an example here. When we have these three areas of sustainability, digitalization, and finance, you can combine all them, right? Today we have this focus on the environmental part. So that could be robo-advisors for impact investing, something we have talked about. There could be payment systems on blockchain-based platforms for renewable energy, something we heard about this morning. Or it could be digital currency for waste management, improvement in smart cities. So there are, for example, some experiments around in Brazil where some cities want to clean up the waste in the street and say, there is a digital currency around and everybody has a wallet. And if you take the waste on the street and bring it back to somewhere, you get a reward, right? So you get something in your wallet. And that's something where you can use it from. Of course, you could theoretically also use cash, but it makes it more easier to do this, to run through that. And the range of examples is really very big. So I will come to some other examples right on now, but the potentials are also big. You could see this as a threat, as we talked about it this morning, with climate change affecting our lives, but you could also see it as an opportunity. So there are some estimates around. Don't ask me about where they get this from. It's from OECD and the UN, and there are many, many more, right? And the numbers, of course, have a broad range, right? But what you can see is that the biggest part is basically embedding the SDGs into the capital markets. And that's really a big opportunity here. That's what they say, right? It's also by offering financial inclusion and development finance, something we also heard, by embedding the SDGs in business models, like the example we just heard, or sustainable consumption, something that we do every day. So let me go into some more examples here. One example that really starts with the consumer is, well, we don't have transparency about our carbon emissions, basically, right? If we live every day, we drive with our car, we eat, we go to a hotel, but we don't basically know what this really means in terms of carbon emissions. Can we save some carbons? Maybe, or if we really change our behavior. And one example, which is here from the startup economy, enables you to calculate your individual carbon footprint based on payments, based, for example, on your credit card spending. So they have developed what is called the Arland Index API, and you probably might then know that it is from a Scandinavian country. That's right, it's from Sweden. And it does that based on this merchant category codes, the MCCs, which is kind of an industry standard. And as you can see, you can then drill down. You have them some kind of categories there, like flights, like gas stations and things like that. Of course, you need to fine tune it, of course. Because the model, of course, doesn't know how much liters of gas you filled in your car, what route exactly you had with your plane, things like that. But based on that, you can get an estimate. You can get more transparency of what this means in terms of your carbon footprint. That is one example. Another one is more on natural capital. And it ties in a little bit to what we heard also this morning. One of the questions is, how can countries that are really rich in terms of natural capital, like rainforests, like biodiversity, species, things like that, how can they get rewarded for the nature they have, right? As of today, a farmer there would say, hey, I burn down this rainforest, I get some farmland, and I get money just because I can raise cattle there or I can use the land, right? But for others in other parts of the world, this may provide harm, right? Because it leads to climate change, it leads to other problems. So is there another incentive mechanism, another model that we could use to really incentivize those farmers to not burn down this rainforest? And there is examples for that, and it starts with securitization platforms that are, of course, then also based on blockchains. So you basically save this part of the rainforest, and you get rewarded if you don't burn it down, right? So you can do that, and you can also then use like drone systems and things like that to monitor if this forest is still there. So of course the investor who does that could be philanthropies or other public sector institutions, maybe also private ones. They of course want to know if that piece of land is still like it was, right? So it doesn't really change. So that is one other example of how you could use it. A third one is carbon emissions in value chains, and that is a project that we did in a joint effort with the UN some time ago. And it turned out that what is not very surprising now, but what we all know, that in most cases the scope 3 emissions, these are the carbon emissions which are not directly polluted or emitted by the manufacturer on site, but are coming from the supply chain, that they account for like 80% of all emissions. That could be in any country or any part of the world. So in Switzerland, for example, most of the carbon emissions are not from the manufacturing processes that are taking place on site in the country, but really from other parts of the world, like 80% of them. So it's easy for Switzerland to say, well, we are carbon neutral in a couple of years. But if you consider this as a very important source as well, you need to think about it in a very different way. And here is an example from a German car manufacturing value chain, which includes Audi, BMW, and many others. And you can see that most of it then really goes down to customers tier 1. There is also other ones here, and also to the suppliers like tier 1 and tier 2 then. It's not the complete picture, but the yellow ones here are those ones which are really the scope 3 ones. And you can measure that more precisely if you use AI and IoT, because as of today, you can't really do that, right? So how can you be more precise in that measurement? Because if you talk about carbon credit markets and tools like that, you of course need to be more precise in measuring scope 3 emissions. So this is one third example on using tech in the financial sector for sustainability. A last example that I have is data platforms, which become more important. This one is about an impact data utility, and it will become a real project very soon. So the idea is basically, if you want to invest in an SME, and we heard that SMEs are very important, especially in developing countries, if you want to invest in them and make sure that they are sustainable in any way regarding the environmental SDGs, you need to know about their sustainability efforts, right? So there needs to be some kind of disclosure mechanism here, which you currently don't have. You currently have a broad variety of standards around from different task forces, from different countries, and there is no one standard that really shows you what sustainability in that respect means. So building that impact data utility with a special focus on sustainable SMEs in developing countries is one thing, because at the moment, financial institutions, banks, insurance companies primarily don't invest because they can't be sure that they are sustainable. If you can make sure that they disclose their data and that you can also include other data like payment data, for example, or other things, then you might be able to track their sustainability efforts in a more sophisticated way. And it allows you to bring together then public and private investees, public and private investors on a single platform. What we also did within the center so far, as said, it just started off. So we did an analysis of like 531 startups. In the meantime, I think we are tracking even more, like 800 or 900 of them. So they all have a focus like the ones I showed. And we developed kind of a taxonomy of them to be able to describe what they are doing. In terms of their strategic direction, in terms of their organizational setup, like is this a peer-to-peer network? Is it more focused on a company? Is it something that happens between companies? Is it a service that is targeted towards governments or towards consumers, just as the examples that you showed? What is the technology behind it? And as you can see from the circled ones, those were the ones that were mentioned in most of the cases. So AI is really leading the field. Well, this is probably not very surprising because it's a very hyped technology at the moment. What is also not surprising that the SDG 13, which is on climate, is also the number one ranked one. But we also could see that other technologies, and that was something you brought up, that the convergence of these different technologies is really taking place. So there are a lot of blockchain-based examples, APIs, open finance models is a very important thing here as well. So this is just an overview, right? You can dive deeper in it. It's based on a paper that we are currently working on, and it shows a little bit the ecosystem of this emerging field. There's also some statistics behind that. I don't want to deep dive into that given the time we have. But we also could see some of the future topics that become relevant. I think this is also something very important here. So the important topics that we could really take out of that analysis from the startups, and as mentioned, the startups are the one usually that take the torch and say, hey, we want to be innovative. We want to do the really cutting edge stuff. And the things we saw is the combination of data sources, just as the example of the data utility showed, is something that becomes more and more important. Like we saw all those examples, like structured data, unstructured data, external, internal. So the combination of those, and I think this is one of the really important one, and to get new insights about sustainability issues and impact is something that becomes very important. Also across companies, across consumers, and we saw how this can be done with technologies, right? Federated data architectures, homomorphic encryption, all those things are around, and we can just do that now. I think that's the very important thing. Then we will see some new instruments around. Well, one new thing was shown this morning with the interspecies money. I think we will see much more of that happening. So entrepreneurs become more creative in applying that, because money and the whole financial sector, of course, is kind of an incentive thing, right? If you are able to give money to people to protect something, for example, or to do something to incentivize them, is more powerful than just saying, hey, do that, please, right? I think that's one of the things that we also learned. So to scale that beyond today's usage, I think is something that we will also see in the future, and which will also become more important. Another thing is it will become embedded into other industries as well. I think finance has kind of a key role here, not only by incentivizing things, but also by embedding it into other examples. Take the mobility sector, for example, which is also a very nice one, right? Where, or the energy sector, where you can have blockchain-based payments, or the AI model we heard this morning, where you can optimize the grid. I think those are all very nice examples. If you have a solar panel on your roof and you want to sell this overproduced energy, it might be nice to have kind of a coin that you could use, right? So as a payment system that is around that you could, but this is not yet there, right? We are not yet there. These are all things. So I think that is an important thing. Standardization will become very important. We heard that blockchains are not interoperable. Well, that's one thing in terms of technical standards, but we also see that from a sustainability perspective, we have many standards that are not compatible with each other. So I think here, also in terms of regulations, this is something, I have a slide for that afterwards, because I think this is a very important piece as well. And then the question how this integrated framework for sustainability and business benefits will look like. Because this is something that, especially if you look into startups, they always struggle, right? And currently they struggle very much. If you look into the whole clean tech sector, for example. So how can you really combine that? When will sustainability really become or have the same status as profitability has? To combine that in a bundle, I think that's one of the great challenges that we have. So how does this measurement framework look like for the future? And last but not least, how can those three goal categories be better aligned? So we just talked about the environmental SDGs. You need to consider all of them, and if you have taken a look at them, you can break them down like in hundreds of sub goals, right? They're becoming interconnected, and in some ways they even are not aligned with each other, or they are even controversial, right? So if you can achieve one goal, you might harm another one as well. So how can you solve that? I think that's also a very important one. And I mentioned regulation, because regulation, as we also heard in the AI regulation presentation, that is something which is very powerful, right? Technology enables things. You can do a lot of stuff. But if you are not able to really do it on a country or even cross-country level, it becomes even more critical. So here is, since 2023, the International Sustainability Standards Board released some of those standards. We have seen quite some financial centers adopting to them, especially here with a focus on the disclosing standards here. Japan in 2024, this year, then in 2025, some things come in the EU, in the UK, Hong Kong, Brazil, 26, Singapore, Australia, USA, well, we will see how that turns out, 27, and China, and then also you can see that the EU from 27 on will also require reporting for listed SMEs, which then even goes a little bit deeper then. And then Singapore for 2028, also for all non-listed companies. So there is kind of a roadmap here that we can see, and those things will ultimately come, probably, most likely. So you need to dress now and prepare for that, right? Yeah. So this brings me to the end, and I hope I'm in time. We've seen that digital finance is a catalyst of green finance, so it promotes sustainability. However, it also enables entirely new things that we haven't seen before. So I think it's also an innovation driver. As mentioned, the incumbents have been rather slow. There wasn't really a big need. There were also always political decisions. If you look into the States, for example, well, every 4 years there is a fourth and back, right? The EU has been very strong. Other countries have promoting it very, very much. But there is kind of a more powerful push by the startups that we have seen, and we have had a look into those. And I think the avenues for the future, not only for research, but also for the industry, is really to look into those new instruments, into ecosystems, standardization, measuring frameworks. Data, of course, is one of the most important things. And last but not least, policies and regulation. I think it will also be very interesting to see how that ends up. So that's my piece. And yeah, this is what the center does. Don't want to go into that as well. We're also working on a digital twin, because we think that the economy, the real economy, has to be linked to the financial one. And then you can really talk about inclusive finance, climate finance, and also other topics for target simulations and things like that. So it's all about data as well. So that's my pick, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Any questions? Yes, George?
So thank you very much. My name is George Zubelli. I'm with the mathematics department at Halifa University. And thank you both for Vivian's talk and for your talk. And actually the question is for both of you. I didn't get the chance in the previous one to ask a question. So my question is, how can we as academicians in mathematics, in statistics, in data science, contribute in an effective way to this revolution, to this digital sustainability revolution, in your vantage point?
Okay. Yeah, well, as mentioned in the presentation, it's all about data, right? So this is a big piece of it. So it starts with the last one, with this digital twin, where you can simulate things, right? I think that's very powerful. And yeah, it's all about that, basically. And there are many ways, really.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I want to say, but he had the micro, so. For a hands-on approach, I mean, the academic work provides us with a lot of ground, because we need to be grounded before we apply it. So, yes, being ahead and moving faster than the industry, it's a way to lead the way. And if you can also provide insights about sandboxes and little experiments, that also allows us in the industry to ground our work and to really try to develop something more practical.
Okay, Patrick's next. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I guess one of my questions, or one of my hopes, is that with impact investing, I spent a week with a whole lot of impact investors, and the reality is when you dig deep into this space, that it's still about achieving a certain rate of return, right? Impact as well. But if you go to pension funds, it's actually a pretty high rate of return, especially in developing countries. So the one solution is for the public sector to de-risk and come up with different ways of de-risking and blended finance and catalytic funding. So I'm just wondering, is there a role there? Have you seen any model that is working effectively in making that happen? These are basically public-private partnerships.
Well, there is maybe one example from Bangladesh where they have very high capital costs, because if they want to borrow from outside the country, it's very expensive. So they thought about, how can we leverage the savings of our people, and they come up with a solution that they said, well, we provide you with a digital currency and a wallet, and you are able then, as a citizen, to invest in the infrastructure that is very close to you, be it your schoolhouse or power generator, things like that. And that then is also covered with some kind of blended finance instrument, so you get something back, right? That is one example that comes to my mind, but they are very rare, yeah, still.
Maybe similar to Patrick's question, but cost of compliance, regulatory compliance, because finance is always complaining about cost of compliance. Now we're adding the cost of regulatory compliance with SDGs. Do you have any comments? Because we can't put this burden on SMEs. So why not multinationals? Or someone else?
So the question would be why they don't do it, or yeah, yes, yeah.
Hello, my name is Diego from University of Salamanca. I want to ask, did you talk about a platform to sell data? Why do you don't talk specifically about data space? That is a technology that, for example, in the European Union is regulated. There are a lot of projects and a lot of money about this technology that already solved this problem about a trusted way to sell the data and share the data between different companies and so on, or you have a new ideas about how to do this, to solve this problem?
Well, if you can stay with it in the EU,
Gracias.
I agree. But what if you have US, EU, and other countries involved?
Well, the specification is from the International Data Space Association, so the idea is something globally to use. European Union is copying this specification, but it's a global idea, I think.
I think from a theoretical and conceptual level, yes, that could be possible, but I'm not sure whether other countries outside the EU will use it. That's like always, it was not invented here, right?
So, Thomas Harjona, MIT. I'm working with Diego on this. We've been speaking about data spaces.
Good.
So seeing there's a global war now in the EV vehicles between not just the US, but now the European Union, isn't this an opportunity to expand the data spaces where you say, well, dear China, you're most welcome to sell your EV vehicles, but you have to show a digital product passport for every piece of battery that you sell into the European Union. And here's the porch of our data space. So you create a special area in the data space where they can at least register their evidence of sustainability from mines and smelters in Indonesia, for example, where they're actually doing tremendous physical damage and there's no one around to point this out or even report it. But here's a possibility of extending the data space architecture, a data porch, where external non-EU companies and entities can actually put their data so that EU members can at least review it.
I think for those kind of examples and applications, it would make a lot of sense, yeah. But however, if you want to then, well, the EU will be powerful to do that for their suppliers, right? But what do you do if you export it to somewhere else, right? Then those countries will then say, hey, you need to comply with our standards, yeah. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks.